Everyone, it's me Rayan, and today I'm back for another factory build showcase for those who want to improve their factory knowledge. Today we're going to be making a consumable called Jincao drink, and it's basically a health consumable you can use in battle. And even though it's not the best of all the other consumables you can use during battle, it can still be quite useful as it provides that instant HP during battle. And I think that if for beginners or for people who just need consumables that will just immediately help them during their battles, I think Jincao Drink is one of them. There is a version called Jincao Tea, which is an upgraded version of
Sweetie
Jincao Drink.
Bomb, stay
I'll make
frosty
sure
and no
to make
slacking.
a build on that later on. But for those who just want Jincao Drink, the build is right behind me, so let's go and check it out. Alright. So when we actually see the build itself, we see that the build actually takes very small space, and it's quite similar to the one I made on Heavy Sheer Knight. This one is smaller than the Heavy Sheer Knight one, but that's because there's only one ore being used and Jincao drink, of course, being used. It's quite simple and basic, really. You see there's a few pipe connections coming from these conduit outlets, and that's all the complicated bit really about this build. So basically the first thing I like to do with my build is if I'm trying to build whatever I'm trying to build, I always go to the database to search it up. So since we're making Jincao drink, we're gonna search up Jincao drink in the item files, and we're gonna check out what you need for it. So looking at Jincao drink, we clearly see that you only need to use one ore. You need to use ferrum ore here. So we see that there's two sections to the ferrum ore bit, and then at the bottom there's the Jincao bit. So we see that for the ferrum ore, we need to refine it to make, and then using a fitting unit, we need to take that ferrum and transform it into ferrum parts. That feeds into a packaging unit, and then we also need to again make ferrum from ferrum, refining ferrum ore. That goes into a molding unit, which makes the ferrum bottles. The bottles are then filled with the Jincao solution, yeah, and the Jincao solution then goes into a filling unit where ferrum bottle with Jincao solution is made. That then feeds into a packaging unit, and then all together Jincao drink is made. So let's take this build slowly. Let's take the first bit here that we've just talked about, the where we have to refine ferrum or into ferrum and then put that into fitting unit so that you can make ferrum parts. So actually looking at my build here, that section is actually this entire section over here. So this section over here, so basically I've got two of them. So the reason I have two of them is that when we look at the packaging unit, we see that for the production there's a 10:5 ratio. So if we simplify that down, that's 2:1 ratio. So you need two inputted. It's just simple as that. It's just basic mathematics. So we clearly see that the ore is going to refining units, then they're going to turn into parts. That part then feeds into packaging unit, and then we see this filling unit over here for the solution. But the thing is that the difficult bit is actually making the solution. So I'm sure most people who watch this video or are watching this video will know how to do these basic things. It's like the basic fundamentals of the game. So the actual bit that confuses a lot of people is these seed picking units and how you can create like an infinite farm and how you can like produce that Jincao solution. So what I've done here is I've put a seed picker unit at the center of this um, like farm, and what I've done is one of the outputs that I've done, because I've done two separate outputs, it makes sense because if we look into the production, we see that one Jincao makes one Jincao seed, but then if I put that one output into this planting unit, we see that one Jincao and one water makes two. So you're feeding one into there, you're feeding one into there, we're actually feeding two into there. Two gets turned to two seeds, and it's just this infinite multiplication that you have. That's why I've made two outputs. But anyways, I'm going on a tangent here. what I've done is that I've put that outputs. However, the problem was when I was making this build originally is that when you've used a planting unit without the pipeline that's connected with water, what happens is it won't come up with the actual formula for the production of Jincao. It'll come up for all the basic ones such as buck flower or acatine or I can't remember the other ones right now, but it just comes up with those. The reason is because you actually need water to produce Jincao, so I had to readjust this entire section over here so that you can see that water comes in here and then water works. So in my previous videos, I've already covered how you can get water, but if we look across here, we know that the river over here has got infinite water source. So we can just put a fluid pump there, Shurenite pylon to the edge, remember, make sure you make it as compact as possible. You then put a conduit inlet, then you come all the way over here, place a conduit outlet, and make sure that feeds into the planting unit. And it's just simple as that. You've got just two planter units. One takes the seed, makes Jincao, that feeds back to the unit, infinite multiplication. One takes one output, that goes into a planter unit. Again, you see the water pipeline on the side here. That feeds into a shredding unit, and the shredding unit is important because it makes Jincao powder. The Jincao powder then feeds into this reactor crucible over here. So the formula that we need for Jincao drink is we need to make Jincao solution, of course. So we see that one Jincao powder, one clean water makes one Jincao solution. Simple, right? So we see that Jincao powder is coming in that with that clean water, and then it's making Jincao solution. And I use a conduit outlet that feeds in the water, just to save the space for any pipes, so it doesn't look messy. It looks nice and neat. Um, So for the output, I put the orange pipe for the Jincao solution, and then we now see that that orange pipe leads us all the way to this filling unit over here. So the filling unit takes in the ferrium bottles. So the ferrium bottles over here, we see that I've put two. Now, originally I thought, oh, okay, this is simple enough. If for parts it's just one ore, make one part. I thought that one ore would make one bottle. Well, if you actually look at the production formula, it shows two ferrium makes one bottle. So what you need to make sure is for a max efficiency farm, you're gonna have to put two of these refining units so that ferrium ore turns into ferrium, and you see two at once, two, two, and two. That will always make one. You then put that into the filling unit so that that one ferrium bottle and that one Jincao solution makes out one ferrium bottle filled with Jincao solution. You then put the Jincao solution in a bottle into this packaging unit over here, and the ferrium parts that we talked about earlier, they're getting fed into this packaging unit, and we also discussed the ratio, so you can then produce Jincao drink. Now, to make sure that you're being maximum efficient, you can check how much you're producing or what your current yield is. So if we look, I've put a star mark next to my Jincao drink, and I can see that I'm producing 6 per minute. I don't know if I can make this more efficient. Who knows? Maybe you guys can do better than me. I was just experimenting out, and I decided that, you know what, let's make some Jincao drink. So per minute is very reasonable, especially for um, people who don't really play during weekdays or whatnot. If you're producing this across the weekdays, it's running in the background, so you can be certain that you're not gonna run out or it's gonna like fail at some point. It'll just keep producing at a constant rate. Now, one last thing before I finish off, because as I said earlier, this is actually quite simple. It's not too complicated as my other ones. Um, we see that since we're using only one type of ore, it's quite like there is a chance or a risk that your ore supply could run out because you've got 4 depot unloaders with ferrium ore, and over here I'm not actually using any ferrium right now. I'm just this is all Shurenite farm and then the battery farm. But if you say for example are using ferrium for another build or another item, then you're gonna have to be very resource efficient. So what I suggest is if we look on the map, we see it nearby, we've got ourselves a mineral bed. So you can just make sure that you've got your rigs working there. Make sure, don't use hydro mining rigs, make sure you use the advanced mining rig. It's because it still works in Wuling. The same thing does not change when you swap regions. So you make sure that you have a constant supply of that. You don't want it to run out if you're going to leave it running in the background. Unless you're monitoring it very carefully, then I suggest you make sure that you basically put a mining rig at every single location possible, because no matter where it is, it'll get sent to the depot. And then, of course, to finish off that Jincao drink, you need to put it somewhere. Usually you put a protocol stash, put a sure night pylon, that protocol stash, send it to your depot. So there we have it, guys. Yeah, it's quite a simple build, not too complicated. I hope this has helped some people. If you guys have got any hints or like tips you can give me so I can start producing much more bigger, complex farms, then I think that'd be quite useful. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm gonna continue making these series. I've made a playlist so that all my current videos will be there. So make sure if you want to check that out. I'll be posting regularly as my exam period is almost over. I have one exam left. Yippee. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye now.